Today, inshallah, we're going to start with the last two activities that we did not finish in chapter 3. So these two activities, they talk about the difference between the physical address and the logical address. As we said before, the logical address or the IP address, which is here, the logical address or the IP address indicates the location, ليكوا معايا? Indicates the location where we want to send this data to. A location is like the location of a house or a business. That's, in general, it might be a remote location. Whereas the physical address indicates the actual name of the person inside the house, or in other words, for us, the address of the machine that's physically connected to me. يعني PC1, the physical address indicates always the physical address of the machine that I'm physically connected to, directly connected to. In other words, it's on the same LAN, or it's inside the same house. So a LAN is terminated by as we said before, it's terminated by a router. So once we see this router port, so we know that this is one LAN, okay? And this is one LAN, and this is one LAN, and this is one LAN. So anything that's terminated with a router, we know that that's one local area network. So now, in this activity, PC1 wants to send data to an FTP server. And this FTP server happens to be inside the same LAN or inside the same house. Okay? So in that case, the IP address would not be used to deliver this message further to another remote area or remote location. All I need to do is just to physically hand in this message to the FTP server. However, in order for me to do this, I need to answer two questions. Okay? First, how would I know, or is this FTP server really inside the same LAN or not? Okay? So that's the first question. If it's inside the LAN, then do I know the physical address of that FTP server or not? That's the second question. If it's inside the LAN, do I know the physical address of that FTP server or not? Okay? When this PC first starts, it knows its own IP address, which is this. This is the IP address. It knows its own physical address, that's for sure. Right? So that's given. Okay? If you need to communicate with any server on the internet, you must know its IP address. Okay? So when you say google.com, that's the IP. When you say amazon.com, that's the IP. So we know the IP address. Okay? Right. First, we need to answer the question is this FTP server on the same local area network or not? And the way for PC1 to figure out the answer for this question is easily by comparing the IP address, which I already know, صح? And my IP address. If the overlap exists in 3 numbers like this, then this means that we are in the same house, or we exist on the same LAN. So that's easy. So the answer for the first question is easy. So here, the overlap is 192.168.1, and here 192.168.1. So this fourth one changes based on the computer. So we have this computer 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way to 256. So we can have up to 256 computers on this LAN. But we all exist in the same house or on the same LAN. So the answer for the first question is easy. So here, PC1 realized that if this FTP server with this IP address exists on the same LAN. Now, question 2. Since it exists on the same LAN, I need to know the physical address of that FTP server. Do I have it? So basically, PC1 will have like a cache. And this cache will have all the physical addresses of the people inside the house only. As a rule, you need to store the physical addresses of all the computers only inside your local area network. Okay? Any PC outside your local area network, you don't have to know the physical address. Because the physical address, as we said, physical address is the address of the machine that I'm physically connected to. Physically معناها on the same LAN. Okay? Do I need to know the physical address of this machine? No. Do I need to know the physical address of that router port? No. It does not exist on the same LAN. Okay? So, for that particular activity, I need to know the physical address of the FTP server. So, I check my cache. Do I have it? If the answer is no, then I can easily get that. And the way for us to get this is using one very important protocol. حد عارف اسمه؟ ايه اسمه؟ Okay. So what is the name of the protocol that I can use to figure out the physical IP address that corresponds to an IP, the physical address that corresponds to an IP address?
Address resolution.
Bravo. Yes. So address resolution protocol, or ARP. Okay, so I use ARP to learn the physical addresses of the people inside my house, or the computers inside the LAN, inside the same local area network. So the way to do this is so remember, I have my own IP address, I have my own physical address, I have the IP address of that FTP server. What I need to know is this. PC1 needs to know this physical address. Okay? So what I need to do is to send what we call ARP request. Okay? This ARP request, it gets sent over this LAN, so it gets sent like this. It's like I'm asking the entire class, who has the IP address 1.9? Okay? And whoever has this IP address, please send me your physical address. So this ARP request, it gets in a form of it gets sent in a form of, do I know who that person is physically? That's what I'm looking for. Okay? So my only option is to send this as a broadcast or unicast or multicast? Broadcast. So I sent this ARP request in a form of broadcast to ask everyone in the same local area network who has the IP address of 1.9. So this guy will say, no, I'm not the one. This guy will say, no, I'm not the one. This guy will say, yes, I'm the one, and my physical address is all C's. Okay? So this is a prerequisite step that I have to do. Once I receive what we call the ARP reply with the physical IP address of the FTP server, I will put it in my cache, and from now on I will use it. So now we answer the first question. Does it exist on the same LAN? Yes, it does, and we can match the IP address, and the first three numbers, they overlap with my IP address, then it exists on the same LAN. The second question, Do I have the physical address? No. Okay, so I send an ARP request and I get the reply, and now I have all the information that I need to start sending the actual data. So, so the activity now becomes very, very simple. What we need to do is to put.
Could you repeat how we know it's in the same location as your phone?
By matching the IP address of that machine with my own IP address.
Yeah, but how?
192.168.1, 192.168.1. So those three numbers, they match, so it exists on the same. Because this fourth one, it keeps changing from one computer to another on the same LAN. As long as we have the first three numbers matching, then we exist on the same LAN. So now this activity becomes very easy. So PC1 knows the physical address. It knows that it exists on the same LAN. So now, what is the destination physical address? What is the destination physical address when I send the data?
On the same network or?
On the same network. I'm trying to send it to FTP server. All C's, right. Type. What is the source physical address? A's. Okay. What is the source IP address? 1.110, which is this one. What is the destination IP address? 1.9. Easy. Okay. So in that case, I will take this data and deliver it physically to the FTP server in one step. Okay, so the second activity now talks about a slightly more complicated scenario. PC1 wants to now communicate with the web server. And this web server exists on a different remote LAN. Okay? And let's just assume for the simplicity that it exists on, how would we know that it exists on a different LAN? Because a LAN is terminated by a router. So, and this one exists on another LAN. Okay? Type. So now let's go back to our two magic questions. Does this web server exist on the same LAN? How would I know? Simply by matching 192.168.1 and here is 172.16. They are totally different. So this server must exist on a different LAN. معناها I need to deliver this to a different house. How would we deliver this? By giving the message or the letter to the postman. Okay? So who is our postman in that case? The router. So in order for PC1 to deliver this message, it sends it to this router port so that the router will pick it up, and the router is our postman that will deliver this message to a remote location. Okay? So remember this, any router will have a physical address and a logical address on every single port of the router. That's why here we say router 1 has this logical address, IP address, and the physical address. This router port will have a different physical address and logical address. It will have an IP address of 172.16.1.1 and a physical address, let's see, EE-EE-EE and so on. Okay? Every single port on each router will have a separate IP address and physical address. Okay? Which will indicate the fact that the postman will give it to another post office and so on. طيب. So let's go back to PC1. PC1 now, answer the first question easily. This web server exists on a different LAN. Okay? Since it exists on a different LAN, what physical address do I need to use? Yes, not the physical address of this web server anymore. I don't need to know the physical address of that remote server at all. I need to know now the physical address of the postman that will get this message and deliver it. Okay? So that physical address is in fact all ones here, which is the physical address of the default gateway. طيب هتقولي طب how would I get this physical address? Well, when PC1 first starts, if you try to start any laptop and on the command line write ipconfig, we all know ipconfig, huh? Simple command, ipconfig. You will see that your machine will have an IP address, which is already known, صح? We'll have a physical address, which is already known. And we'll have another very important piece of information, which is called default gateway IP address. This default gateway is this. Is the IP address of the router port that exists on the same LAN. So that's already known by PC1, by default. Okay? So the second question changes slightly. I will not ask for the physical address that corresponds to the FTP server's IP address because I don't need to communicate with the FTP server. It's not the physical address of the web server because the web server does not exist on the same LAN. Hence, I don't need to know the physical address of the web server. Okay? But since it exists on a different LAN, then I need to know the physical address of the default gateway. So the ARP request, okay, initially, will have the IP address of the default gateway, which is 192.168.1.1. And the reply comes back from the default gateway. My physical address is all ones. Okay? طيب يبقى كده احنا we answered the two questions. The first question, web server exists on a different LAN. The second question, we know now the physical address of the default gateway. So now let's solve this activity. So this activity now asks us for the destination physical address, source physical address, source IP address, and destination IP address. So what are these values now, given what we have discussed? So what is the destination physical address? All ones. Anyone disagrees? This is the physical address of the default gateway because the web server exists on a different LAN. Okay? Type. What is the source physical address? All A's. Yeah. So that's okay. Type. Now, what is the source logical address? Lower 192.168.1.110. What is the destination IP address? Yes. 172.16.1.99. This is very important. The IP address in the data itself does not change. It always indicates where that packet is coming from and where it's going to. The ultimate source and the ultimate destination. What changes is the physical address. And let me complicate that scenario a little bit more. This frame right here will allow me to physically deliver this to the router port low R1 in. Okay? So now this router will pick it up and will perform the routing, which we will talk about later, until it figures out that I need to route this and send this physically to web server because it exists on the LAN that's connected to this port. Remember, this port has an IP address, this, which is 172.16.1.1, okay, which clearly exists on the same LAN as the web server, صح? Because it matches the first three numbers, and it has its own physical address. And I made this up, okay? So now I wanted to figure out what will happen in step 2 when this port picks it up and tries to send. It tries to send, this port now will try to send another frame with destination physical address, destination source physical address, source IP address, destination IP address, and here is the data. So this one is the destination physical address, source physical address, source IP, destination IP. So what are these values now? Remember, this frame exists where? Here. On this router port, which physically exists on the same LAN like the web server. Okay? So this port will now send that frame, which is, in our case, it's step 2. So this is step 1. This is step 2. Step 1, where we send from PC1 to the default gateway. Step 2, when we send from this router port to the final destination, which is the web server. So what is the destination, physical address, source, and so on? I'll give you a few seconds to write it. So in step 2, what is the destination physical address? Here. D, which is the physical address of the web server directly, assuming that it exists on this same LAN. What is the source physical address? E-E-E. It's the physical address of the port. Remember, this is a different port now. And each router port, Zamod, has IP address and physical address, which is different. Because the 1.1 now exists on, now we are here now. We are in this part. Okay? 1.1.1 exists on a different LAN because it's on a different router port.
So there are
Not two ports on the same router. Each port on the router has different physical address and different IP address.
So router can have two.
The router has as many IP addresses as the number of ports, and as many physical addresses as the number of ports.
So they have more than 2 ports?
Oh yes, yes. And even the router that you have at home, did you check it? How many ports do you have on this router? Sometimes 8, 9, something like that. So each one of these will have different IP address and different physical address. So what is the source IP address, huh? 192.168.1.1.110. And what is the destination IP address? Huh? 172, bro. .16.1.99. IP address in the data do not change. We will talk about one exception later on, where the IP address will change. But as far as we are concerned now, the data itself will always have the bimana. In other words, our postman, the router, does not manipulate the IP address. It only changes the physical addresses according to which LAN we are in now. But the IP address in the data will remain always the same. It always indicates the ultimate source and the ultimate destination. So even if we have 100 steps, okay, in the middle, the source IP address, the destination IP address are the same. They never change. Well, almost never. As we said, we will talk about an exception later. Mاشي? But in each step, physical address changes, which indicates physically inside the house which one do we hand this message to. So in each LAN, you keep handing this message physically to your default gateway every time until you arrive to the final LAN where the web server physically exists. So in that case, the person exists inside your house, so you'll deliver it physically to that person. واضح كده؟
When we can use IP address for the router, point one.
Only in the ARP request. The ARP request is just a prerequisite step for me to learn the physical address that corresponds to the default gateway's IP address. So only in the ARP request, I need to use the default gateway IP address. Once I know the physical address of the default gateway, now I need to send the actual data back. In the actual data, I keep the IP address as the IP address of the web server. It does not change. واضح كده؟ So ARP, or Address Resolution Protocol, is the protocol that we use to learn the physical addresses that correspond to a specific IP address. And for that, we should never use an IP address that does not exist on the same LAN, because we're not required to know any physical address of any person outside our house. That's the rule. Okay? We should never need to know the physical address of any machine outside our local area network. Okay? We're not required to know that. Any questions?